Shit. Never mind. We'll have to skip it. I don't want to, but I read all the information that was online that was available to read, but I did not read the book because I didn't find a copy of it online. So that's my end of that.
Okay.
All right. So here we go. And Scott, I'm just going to read your title as it is presented on LinkedIn. Okay. That's how I'm going to intro the show. This is 364. Is that right, John?
65.
365. All right.
Wow.
3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Mail Right podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're extraordinarily excited. We have an incredible guest this afternoon. So I'm going to just read the title of this guest. It's Scott Agnew, who is the CEO and operating partner at Keller Williams Realty, East Valley, Tempe, Arizona, Park City, Utah, and KW, Utah region, leadership and motivational training, agent business coaching, and life advancement. And the man has a list of achievements in a war longer than my arm. So if you want to highlight any of those, Scott, feel free to do so. But that was my introduction. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
Well, sure. I appreciate that. And I'm glad I'm able to, talk with you guys a little bit about myself. I don't talk about myself very often, so it's kind of almost a little bit uncomfortable at times. But I tell you what, I guess if you could summarize it, nobody, especially myself, would ever have believed I would accomplish what I've accomplished. But I owe it a lot. I owe so much of it to the amazing, leadership that I've been able to learn from over the years, with people like Gary Keller, of course, Mo Anderson, a guy named Robert Kalinsky, Bob Kalinsky, a good friend, David Osborne, Linda and Jim McKissick, Beverly Steiner. I mean, there's just a long litany of people that have helped contribute to the overall success of this company. And I'm pretty honored to be part of it.
Beautiful. And John, for anybody that might not already know who you are, would you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I'm the co-founder of mail-right.com. We build beautiful real estate websites on WordPress, and we have a suite of marketing tools that will help the agent get some great digital leads. Back over to you, Rob.
And honestly, I don't usually actually introduce myself, but Scott, I don't think you know who I am. So I will introduce myself to you as opposed to the audience. So I'm an SEO guy who's been specializing in residential real estate for 14 years. And as far as I know, I might very well be the most experienced real estate residential SEO consultant founder that exists. I have a marketing company that I founded called InboundREM.com. You can see it right behind me. And I educate agents, lots of them, tons of them, but for free. I do inbound marketing style content where I give them the free digital tips and advice that they need to rank in Google My Business, change their mindset as it relates to inbound marketing and real estate, and a whole bevy of other things. So that's who I am. So without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, for the first part of the show, we are really excited to talk to Scott because Scott, after all these years in real estate, you decided, I'm guessing that you decided to put your knowledge down in book form, and you wrote a book called The Top 10 Mistakes That Prevent You from Being a Long-Term Leader. Before you tell us about the book itself, might you tell us why, after all these years, you decided to write and especially a guy who just self-identified, you don't like to promote yourself, or you don't like talking about yourself. So why write a book?
Sure. Well, it was during the pandemic and I didn't have anything else to do because I was grounded. I couldn't travel. So, just by virtue of, having extra time on my hands, I got this, I joined a group of entrepreneurs, and I found one thing in common between all these amazing, successful, what I call fulfilled entrepreneurs in a network that I joined called Genius Network. And I saw so many human beings that were not thinking about their own profits or their own success or their own fulfillment, but rather they're more focused on what they can do to help other people achieve what they've achieved and kind of what's in it for them type of attitude. In fact, the founder of the network just wrote a book, and I'm going to promote it because it's an incredible book. It's called What's in It for Them. You've heard of the book called, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Well, this book is about how to win the right friends and influence the right people. And based on some of what I've learned from the gentleman, Joe Polish, that wrote that book, I decided, and I was inspired to write my own book. And the main theme around leadership, I wanted to take a much different approach. That approach was more about how to interact as a long-term leader in the moment, rather than focusing on all the hard skills, the tools, the objectives, the plans and all those kinds of things. One of the things I have learned over the years, a plan almost never gets executed the way you write the plan. And so you're always, pivoting, you're always making adjustments. You might even scrap a strategy and have to go back to your team and say, we're not going to do that, And so long-term leadership is about how you do that so that your team doesn't, put a noose around your neck or walk out the room, right?
Right.
So those are some key elements of being in the game for for the long term.
So that leads me to another question, and then I'm going to hand one over to John. I'm curious. You are a man that appears to be, from everything I can see, at the high side of your career. So you are also talking about having joined a networking group while you're at the top of that mountain, and saying, I'm going to join a group of like-minded individuals. How important has mentorship been throughout the entirety of you've now twice mentioned it in the first part and now here. So how important has mentorship been to you inside your career, would you say?
It's been incredibly important. It's probably been the main contributor to helping me, keep my head on straight, stay focused, and more importantly, help me get in touch with the things that I really want, and help me get in touch with the human being that I want to be. My father passed away when I was 8 years old. The book says I was 10, but the truth is it's 8.
Okay.
And, I grew up without, somebody to kick me in the butt, somebody to hold me accountable, somebody to challenge me, somebody to, what dads do. Well, I didn't really have that, but I had many figures in my life that, filled that role for me. And, starting all the way back to Little League, and Mr. Freegee, who was my first coach. And then in high school after that, Mr. Fulton, who was my basketball coach. And, these gentlemen helped shape my work ethic and helped me understand what was, there were times when I thought I was, a 4 on a scale of 1 to 10. And they would say, no, Agnew, you're an 8 or a 9, and they helped me be more realistic about my, what I was actually achieving, because I never really felt like I was good enough. I was that's part of the reason I think people become entrepreneurs. They've got something inside them that they need to prove. And so mentorship has played a huge role in helping me get comfortable, with who I am. It helped me write the book. I mean, that's crazy, right? Writing a book on leadership. There's been thousands of books written about leadership. And yet I wanted to write something that I thought was different, about the how of leadership, not the what. And so the soft skills, I think, are, were incredibly important to me because I was taught by mentors. I was given a lot of mentorship. Dr. Jack Vanderwoude helped me. And of course, one of the, premier people that helped me was Gary Keller. He's the guy that taught me how to not write scathing emails to people.
Hey, you need to teach John that. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. Everybody, that was a total joke. All right, John, take it away, sir.
I'm so hurt, Robert. I really am so hurt. It's been a rough year, and you're just finishing it off so well, Rob. There we go. Scott, from all the things that you probably cover in the book, what would be one that comes straight into your mind here and now that you would like somebody to learn from the book after reading it?
Yeah, well, I think the message of the book is very basic. It's very simple, and that is, how do you increase your potency as a leader? And what I mean by potency is, when you make a suggestion, or when you give some guidance, or when you offer some perspective, how do you get your people in a place where they're anxious to hear what you have to say as a leader? I had a wonderful coach many years ago who taught me this, and it made sense to me. He said, in most accountability sessions, or reviews, or quarterly summaries, when you're having those kinds of meetings with your team, and in my case, leadership team, because everybody that reports to me, they're all leaders in their own right. He's told me, he said 99% of the time, those meetings leave people feeling worse than when they came into the meeting. And it made sense to me, because yes, and why did it feel worse? A lot of times you feel worse because you just feel like you're not doing enough, and that's when you go home and you start, kicking the dog, and your kids aren't good enough, and your wife isn't supporting you enough, because you've just come out of this interaction that, you feel like, gosh, there's so much more that I can do. And what it creates anxiety, and it creates stress. And as a leader, it's important not to have that kind of anxiety, and not to have that stress, and certainly not to let that bleed into your interactions with your leaders, because it flows downhill, right? Whatever you start, it will continue to pay itself forward. So it's more about being inquisitive. And instead of being, as a leader, being in a directive mode, I'm going to use this word, be in a requestive mode. One of the superpowers of Gary Keller is, all he does is ask great questions, and he's there to learn. And as a leader, I'm there to learn. And what am I there to learn? I'm there to learn what my people are feeling, what their obstacles are, what their challenges are. And I'm also there to learn what their real victories are. What are they really proud of? They might be proud of something that isn't part of my objective plan or their objective plan, but they're proud of a win, or they're proud of how they move the ball forward. And it might seem small, but to them, it could be big enough to actually fulfill them and give them a motivation to really go out there and bust their tail at the end of the day, because they realize that, they're cared for as human beings, not just for what, they can accomplish. And I think in business today, especially today, you've got a scenario where the typical younger leader, if you will, they're more wired around the emotional and, psychological side of the business than they are around the competitive side of the business. And so competition versus collaboration is something I talk about in the book. It's a very interesting topic to me.
That's fascinating. Yeah, well, it's a bit of a balance, isn't it? Depending on personality style, isn't it? Some people, they're, especially on the sales side, they're really driven by the competitive element in office or a scenario, where other types, it's something they can some ways be just as effective in sales, but they've got a very different style, and they don't particularly like that competitive side. Would you agree with that, or do you think I'm off track?
Well, yeah. I mean, when you look at the top productive agents in real estate, they're task driven. We call them taskers. They do one thing, they accomplish one thing, they take about 1 second to enjoy their accomplishment, and they're ready to accomplish the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And they achieve at a very high level. They're the type of folks that, they're in the top 2-3%, and they do, 50% of the business. And that's just the way it is. I mean, that's the way it is in sport, professional athletics. Unfortunately, it's probably not that way in politics. We can't even find a 1 or 2% in politics these days. But if you really look at the difference in how they're motivated, that level of agent is motivated by challenge. They want to be challenged. They want to be called out on their, imperfections. They want to, they just have super high expectations for themselves. They have high expectations for others around them. And, you know, my book is ideal for this kind of achiever, because the challenge that those top 1, 2, and 3% have is that while they make a tremendous amount of cash flow, revenue, they tend to suffer quite a bit. And the suffering comes from having high turnover on their team. And so they're constantly retraining, they're rehiring, and it feels to them, I think, in many cases, somewhat like a hamster wheel, right? The more they do, the more they've got to take care of everything. And they don't have a sense of who they can, you know, bring into their business that could actually replace them, you know, so that they could still own a majority interest of the business and have a life. This is the kind of stuff I talk about in my book, because anybody that has the will to build a, you know, big real estate business or any big business, the challenge they have is, you know, to be able to change their mindset and be able to enjoy it and be able to let other people have opportunities inside, you know, their business, and then open the door for them to do it, and do it in a way where people trust each other, and do it in a way where people get great results without a lot of friction or anxiety. Because after all, I mean, you know, you can only go to so many restaurants, you can only buy so many pairs of shorts and have so many cars and so many homes and all that stuff. What's left after that? After that is, you know, you want to have a life and you want to have something that you can, you know, you can enjoy. You want to have maybe you want to have a family, you know, and enjoy your family. So that's why leadership is so important, because it gives you great leverage over your business.
That's fantastic. Over to you, Robert.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, and Scott, we're going to go for a break. When we come back, Scott, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about talking to the world at large. Our audience is 100% real estate professionals. So what would you want the top 3 things that you'd want to point out to somebody about? Maybe the top 3 like lesson deliverables you feel like your book might be able to help somebody with. Let's call it that. Like, what are the top 3 lessons that you might learn from your book? And when we come back from break, I'm going to ask you to serve those up, and then if it's okay with you, I'm going to ask some questions about Keller Williams.
Great.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for staying tuned. As always, do us a favor, please, and give us a like wherever you're watching this video, whether that be YouTube or your favorite podcasting service. We would really appreciate it. Leave us a comment. John and I always read them and always appreciate them. We will be right back.